You won't believe what I discovered at my own son's funeral. One moment, I was a wealthy retiree with everything in place. The next, my entire world shattered. I'm Marlene. At 71, I thought I'd seen enough heartbreak to last a lifetime. But I had no idea what was coming. It was a chilly Tuesday morning in March when the phone rang. You know how sometimes you just know something bad's about to happen. That was me, sitting in the kitchen, the same place I used to cook Michael's breakfast every single day before he moved out. That call changed everything. Mrs. Patterson, I'm afraid there's been an accident. My son. My only child. Michael. Just like that. Red light. Careless driver. 1 second he was here. The next. Silence. And not just silence in the room. It was like everything in me shut off. I planned the funeral in a haze. His co-workers spoke highly of him. Dr. Patterson, the one who stayed late, the one who cared too much. They said he was always working, always helping, never stopping. It made me wonder. Was he too busy? Did I miss signs? Should I have done more? That day, standing in the front row of the church where he'd been baptized, wearing the same black dress I wore to bury my husband, I tried to hold it together. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. As people were leaving, I saw them. 3 little girls. Identical. About 10 or 11. Dressed all in black. Holding hands. Watching my son's grave like they knew him. Not like curious kids, but like they were grieving. And then one of them whispered, "Bye, Daddy." Froze. Did she just call him Daddy? I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. It felt like the world had tilted under my feet. They ran off before I could say a word. 3 small figures vanishing into the parking lot, hand in hand, like shadows disappearing at sunset. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, tried to reassure me. "Sweetheart, it's just the grief. You've had a long day." But I wasn't imagining things. Not this. That night, my house felt emptier than ever. Flowers filled every corner. Casseroles lined the counters. Sympathy cards stacked on the table. But all I could think about were those girls. Who were they? Why were they crying at my son's grave? And that one word. Daddy. Michael had never been married. Never mentioned kids. We talked every week. So how could this be? I tried to push it out of my mind. Told myself they were mistaken. Visiting another grave nearby, maybe. Just a weird coincidence. But I knew better. My gut said this meant something. And I've learned never to ignore your gut, especially when it whispers in the middle of the night. So the next morning I did something I hadn't done in years. I went back to the cemetery. I told myself it was to bring fresh flowers. Talk to Michael like people do. But truthfully, I was searching. For a week I found nothing. Just quiet mornings, soft wind in the trees, an occasional groundskeeper nodding politely. I started to think I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe I was losing it. Then, on the 7th morning, they appeared again. 3 little girls in navy blue school uniforms, walking slowly toward Michael's grave, each one holding a flower, just like before. But this time, I stayed completely still. They didn't notice me at first. I watched as they knelt carefully, placing their flowers, red carnations this time, on the fresh earth. Their movements were gentle, like they'd done this before. Like they belonged there. One of them whispered again, just loud enough to carry on the breeze. "We miss you, Daddy. Aunt Margaret says you're in heaven now." That was it. I couldn't stay silent anymore. I stood and they noticed me. 3 identical faces looked up in unison, eyes wide, startled. We stared at each other for a long moment. I could feel my heart pounding. The girl in the middle, the one who always seemed to speak first, stepped forward. Are you Daddy's mommy?" she asked. He nodded. I couldn't even get the words out. She glanced at her sisters, then back at me. "I'm Faith," she said, her voice polite but unsure. "These are my sisters, Hope and Joy. We were Daddy's daughters." I couldn't breathe. 10 years old. Triplets. My son had daughters. 3 daughters. I looked closer and suddenly I could see it. The shape of their eyes, the way their noses turned up slightly when they were thinking. Just like Michael. How had I not known? Why hadn't he told me? Where do you live? I finally managed to ask. With Aunt Margaret, Faith said. She takes care of us now. And where is she today? At work, said Hope quietly. She cleans offices downtown. Joy added. We're supposed to be at school, but we had to see Daddy one more time. And in that moment something in me shifted. They weren't just names or a mystery anymore. They were real. They were family that I knelt so I could look them in the eye. Why didn't you get to say goodbye? Asked gently. Joy's eyes welled up. Daddy was going to visit that weekend. But then Aunt Margaret got a call. She started crying and said there'd been an accident. The weekend Michael died. He'd cancelled our usual Sunday dinner. Said he had something important he couldn't miss. Was he planning to see them? To finally tell me. Did you see him often? Yes. Every other weekend, Faith said. Sometimes after school too. He taught us to make pancakes, took us to the park, read us stories. Daddy gave the best hugs, Hope added. And he always brought little surprises. Coloring books, ribbons, puzzles. I felt a flood of emotions. Grief, disbelief, and an aching guilt. My son had children. He was a father. And I'd never even known. I should have been in their lives. Should have baked cookies with them, taken them to the zoo, bought them too many birthday presents. But I didn't even know they existed. Did he ever talk about me? Asked carefully. Faith nodded. He said you were the best mommy in the world. That you were still very sad about Grandpa Gerald. And he didn't want to make you sadder. That wasn't true. Yes, I miss Gerald terribly. But I wasn't broken. And even if I had been, wouldn't knowing I had grandchildren have helped heal me? I would have loved you, I whispered. So much. Faith stepped forward and placed her small hand on mine. It's okay, she said in that serious, wise tone only a child can carry. Daddy said grown-ups make hard choices sometimes, to protect the people they love. Before I could respond, I heard a voice, sharp, worried, cut through the quiet. Faith. Oh, Joy. What are you doing here? A woman was hurrying toward us, panic etched across her face. She looked to be in her 50s. Tired eyes, graying hair pulled back into a no-nonsense bun, wearing clothes that said she worked hard and rested little. The girls shrank together as she approached. I'm sorry, Aunt Margaret, Faith said quickly. We just wanted to see Daddy again. Margaret pulled them close, checking them over like she expected scrapes or bruises. Then she turned to me, suddenly aware I was there. Her expression shifted instantly, concern turning to guarded suspicion. Who are you? She asked, almost accusingly. I stood slowly. I'm Marlene Patterson, Michael's mother. Her face went pale. She glanced from me to the girls, back to me again. I could see her doing the math, connecting the dots she clearly hoped I'd never find. Come on, girls, she said, reaching for Faith's hand. We need to get back to school. Wait, I pleaded, stepping forward. Please. I just found out about them. I deserve to understand. No, she said firmly, clutching them tighter. I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Patterson. Truly. Michael was a good man. But these girls have been through enough. I'm their grandmother, I said more forcefully this time. Surely I have a right. You have no rights here, she cut in, sharper than before. Michael made his choices. He had reasons. Don't make this harder. She started walking away, practically pulling the girls with her. But Faith turned one last time, her young face full of confusion and heartbreak. Will we see you again? She called out. Before I could answer, they were gone, packed into an old blue sedan and driving away, leaving me standing alone in the middle of a cemetery, with more questions than I ever thought possible. That night I sat at my kitchen table, tea untouched, hands trembling. My son had children, 3 of them, and he'd hidden them from me. Why? What was so terrible that he thought I couldn't handle it? I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't letting this go. For the next 3 days, I couldn't think of anything else. I found myself driving aimlessly through neighborhoods, scanning every street for that old blue sedan. It was ridiculous. I had no address, no clue where they lived, and the city was far too big for that kind of search. But I couldn't sit at home doing nothing. My granddaughters were out there. Michael's daughters. And I needed to know them. On Saturday morning, I tried a different approach. I drove to Michael's old apartment building. The manager, Mr. Torres, had helped me sort through his things after the funeral. Maybe, just maybe, he'd seen something. "Mrs. Patterson," he said when he saw me. "How are you holding up?" "Still breathing," I replied honestly. "I have a question. Did Michael ever have visitors? Little girls, maybe?" Mr. Torres hesitated. "I don't usually talk about tenants' business. But if it's important, yes. 3 girls came by sometimes. Quiet. Always with an older woman. Not young. Maybe mid-50s. Looked tired. That sounded like Margaret." "How often?" "Every couple of weeks. Sometimes he picked them up. Other times they'd come here. Sweet kids. Always polite." Thanked him, heart pounding. Another piece of the puzzle had clicked into place. Later that day, I returned to the cemetery. Parked far enough to stay hidden but close enough to watch. If they came before, maybe they'd come again. Waited. And just when I thought it was pointless, there they were. That same beat-up blue sedan pulled up. Margaret stepped out, followed by the girls. This time in jeans and sweaters, weekend clothes. They moved quietly to the grave. No flowers this time. Just presents. I waited until they'd been there a few minutes, then approached slowly. Carefully. Margaret spotted me first. Her shoulders tensed. "Mrs. Patterson," she said flatly. "Why are you here?" "The same reason you are," I replied gently. "Visiting my son." The girls peeked around her, curious but wary. Seeing them again in the daylight, with nothing between us but grief and truth, made it impossible to hold back tears. "We brought Daddy wildflowers," Joy said softly. "We picked them ourselves." "They're beautiful," I whispered. "He'd love them." Margaret didn't speak. Her expression was tight, exhausted, guarded. "Margaret," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Please. Just a few minutes. I need to understand. I'm not here to take anything from you. I just want to know about them." The girls listened closely. You could tell they were used to watching adults for clues about their future. "Aunt Margaret," Faith said gently. "Maybe we should talk to her. Daddy always said she was nice." Margaret looked at her, then at me. Her face softened barely. "Not here," she said finally. "There's a diner on Maple Street. Millie's. You know it." He nodded. 10 minutes, she said. "But this doesn't change anything." She didn't know it yet, but it would change everything. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in a faded vinyl booth at O'Malley's Diner. The girls sat across from me, sharing a plate of fries and chocolate milkshakes, giggling softly. Across the table, Margaret stirred her coffee like it was a ritual to keep her calm. I looked at her and said, "How long have you been taking care of them?" She didn't look up. "Since their mother died. Nearly 4 years." Their mother. My heart tightened. That meant they'd been only 6 when they lost her. And Michael, he'd been doing all this alone. "She was my sister," Margaret added. "Sarah. She had health issues. Michael helped where he could. But when she passed, there was no one else. And he never told me," I murmured, more to myself than to her. Margaret finally looked up. "He said you were still grieving your husband. That you'd been through enough. But knowing them, meeting them, that would have healed something in me." "Maybe." But he was scared. Scared you couldn't handle more loss. I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. I saw the tired lines in her face, the way her eyes darted to the girls every few seconds, like checking they were still safe. "There's something you should know," Margaret said softly. "Sarah's condition, it was genetic. A rare muscular disorder. Progressive. And it's hereditary." My stomach dropped. "Do the girls?" She nodded, swallowing hard. "2 of them. Hope and Joy. Faith doesn't show signs yet." I looked at them. Sweet little girls laughing over spilled milkshake and splitting fries 3 ways. And suddenly I saw it. The way Hope leaned on her elbow a little more. The way Joy's hands trembled when she reached for her cup. How bad is it? It can be managed with therapy, meds, the right care. But it's expensive. And exhausting. Michael had been carrying all this. And now it was all on Margaret. And he never told me because he thought it'd hurt too much? Yes. Margaret nodded. He didn't want to break you. But I wasn't broken. Not then. Not now. I was angry. But more than anything I wanted in. I want to help, I said firmly. Financially. Physically. Whatever you need. She stared at me. Why? Because they're my granddaughters, I said. Because they're Michael's children. And because I've spent years surrounded by money and silence. It's time to trade that for something that matters. The girls, still half listening, glanced up. Faith, always the little leader, walked over to me. Are you really our grandma? She asked. I smiled, throat tight. Yes, sweetheart. I am. She nodded like she was making a very grown-up decision. Then you should know. Hope and Joy are a little sick. But we still do everything together. I reached out and took her hand. Especially because they're sick. That's what families do. We take care of each other. Across the table, Margaret exhaled for what looked like the first time in months. Okay, she said. We can try. But we do this slowly. My way. And their needs come first. Always. Always, I agreed. And for the first time since Michael died, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Hope. Our first official visit was the following Saturday. Margaret insisted it happen at their home. Their space, she said. Where they're comfortable. I agreed completely. I was nervous. What do you bring when you're meeting your grandkids for the first time, and they're already 10? The house was modest but cozy. A little worn but clearly full of love. Backpacks lined up neatly by the door. Crayon drawings on the fridge. I saw signs of structure, of care, of survival. Margaret opened the door before I could even knock. Girls, she called out, Mrs. Patterson's here. Grandma Marlene. Faith corrected her as she came bounding into the room. Hearing that title still hit me like a warm wave. They'd bake cookies. Chocolate chip. Lumpy and uneven, but the best I'd ever tasted. We sat in the living room together, me on the couch, Faith tucked at my side, Hope resting gently against my arm, Joy curled in the armchair across from us, holding the plate of cookies like a prized treasure. Then Hope pulled out something unexpected. We made you a book, she said, handing me a bundle of construction paper tied with yarn. It's about our family. I opened it slowly. The first page showed a tall, thin man with brown hair and a giant smile. Daddy, written above him in colorful crayon. The next pages had the three of them holding hands, with moments from their lives sketched out in vivid detail. Bike rides, pancakes, bedtime stories. There was their mom too, appearing in the early drawings, then gradually gone. Then Aunt Margaret, arms wide open in every scene like a constant safety net. And Michael. Michael was in almost every picture. Daddy said you lived far away, Joy said. But that someday we might meet you. I didn't live far, I said softly. I just didn't know. But I wish I had. I would have loved to be part of all this. Hope leaned more heavily into me. She was smaller than her sisters, and I noticed how easily she tired. And how naturally Faith shifted to help. Handing her a pillow, checking her sister without being asked. Then Faith, always the blunt one, asked, Are you really rich? Faith. Margaret snapped. It's okay, I laughed. Yes, I suppose I am. Your grandfather and I saved carefully. He wanted to make sure we were always taken care of. Daddy said some rich people don't like poor people, Joy added casually. But he said you weren't like that. I swallowed a lump in my throat. Your daddy was right. Having money doesn't make someone better or worse. It just gives you more responsibility to help when you can. They nodded seriously, as if I'd just handed them a new rule of life. We spent the afternoon flipping through photo albums. Michael smiling with the girls at birthday parties, helping with homework, planting flowers in the yard. There was a light in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. A joy he never showed me because he'd been hiding too much. Hope had begun to fade by late afternoon. She leaned against me, her head drooping, eyes heavy. "I'm not tired," she whispered. "It's okay to be tired," I said, brushing her hair gently. "Especially when you've done so much today. Will you tell us a story?" Faith asked. "What kind of story?" "Tell us about Daddy when he was our age." And so I did. I told them about his obsession with bugs. The time he tried to bathe the cat. How he used to stand on a chair to help me cook. They laughed. They listened. They remembered him, not just as their dad but as my son. By the time Joy curled up in my lap and drifted off, I felt like I'd been theirs forever. And somehow, in that cozy, cluttered living room, with coloring books on the table and mismatched socks peeking out from tiny sneakers, I realized I wasn't lost anymore. I had found something bigger than grief. I had found my family. Later that afternoon, Margaret and I sat in the kitchen while the girls played quietly in the next room. There were more cookies, more tea, and for once, more understanding. "There's something you should see," she said after a long pause, pulling a tablet from a drawer. "Michael made these for the girls, in case he couldn't visit." She clicked a video, and there he was, Michael, smiling, sitting cross-legged on the floor of what looked like his apartment. "Hi, my beautiful girls," he said through the screen. "Sorry I couldn't be there today. But I've got a story for you." What followed was a fairy tale, about 3 princesses who had to save a kingdom with kindness and courage. He used silly voices, made wild faces. The girls watched, mouths open, though I could tell they'd seen it before. Probably dozens of times. At the end, his voice softened. "Remember, Daddy loves you more than all the stars in the sky. Always. Even when you can't see me. Even when you miss me. I'm with you." When the screen went dark, no one spoke for a while. I wiped my face. I hadn't even realized I was crying. "He made a lot of those," Hope whispered. "For when we missed him too much." "He was a good daddy," Faith added. "The best." Margaret sat across from me, looking more tired than before, but somehow lighter too. "This is hard for me," she admitted. "They've been my whole world since Sarah died. Letting anyone in. It scares me. I'm not here to take them away," I said gently. "But you don't have to carry this alone anymore." She looked at me carefully. "Hope's next physical therapy eval is next month. Joy's due for a neurology follow-up. And the insurance company's already pushing back. What if I handle it?" He offered. "The appointments, the costs, all of it. No more fights with insurance companies. Just the care they need." She hesitated. "I can't let you just pay for everything." "This isn't about money," I said. "It's about family. About Michael's children. My granddaughters. About us." The girls had gone quiet. But I noticed Faith had moved closer, clearly listening. Then she said in her usual way, direct, no nonsense. "Aunt Margaret, you've been really tired lately. Maybe Grandma Marlene could help." "Just a little," Hope chimed in. "We don't want you to be tired all the time." Looking at them, these 3 little girls trying to take care of the woman who'd sacrificed everything for them, I knew this wasn't just about me gaining something. It was about all of us sharing something. Burden. A responsibility. Family. "What if we start small?" I suggested. "I help with the next appointments. Just to see." Margaret looked from Faith to Hope, then back to me. "Okay," she said slowly. "We can try. But it has to work for the girls. No big promises. No big changes. No pressure," I said, smiling. "Just one step at a time." When I left that evening, Joy followed me to the door, slipping a tiny piece of paper into my hand. It had her phone number, scrawled in careful, blocky numbers. "In case you want to call us," she whispered. "I'd love to," I said. "More than you know." Driving home, I realized this wasn't just a reunion. It was the beginning of something new. The next few weeks moved fast and slow, all at once. I started joining them at doctor appointments. I learned their medications, their schedules, their signals. I watched Hope struggle through stretches that made her wince. I helped Joy through physical therapy when she didn't want to try anymore. I sat with Faith while her sisters slept off the exhaustion of treatment, and she quietly asked, "Is it going to get worse?" I did what I could. Brought snacks, paid bills, asked questions, took notes. But what I learned most was this. Being part of their lives meant showing up, not just with money or errands but with presence, with patience. One morning, during what I thought was a routine checkup, Dr. Chen looked more serious than usual. "We've reviewed the latest test results," she said. "Hope and Joy's condition is progressing faster than expected." The room fell quiet. "What does that mean?" I asked. "There's a treatment program at Johns Hopkins," she explained. "It's still experimental, but early outcomes are promising. The girls would need to stay in Baltimore 6 to 8 months, possibly longer." I glanced at Margaret. Her eyes were already full of panic. "I can't leave work for that long," she whispered. Dr. Chen added, "Most medical costs are covered by the study, but not housing, food, lost wages." I didn't hesitate. "We'll go. All of us. I'll rent a place near the hospital. We'll figure it out." Margaret looked stunned. "You don't understand. It's not just a vacation. It's constant care, exhaustion, fear. You'll be responsible for everything." "I am responsible," I said. "They're mine too." Hope had wandered over by then, sensing the seriousness in the room. "Are we going to get sicker?" she asked, voice barely a whisper. I knelt beside her. "Not if I have anything to say about it." That night, Margaret and I sat in the kitchen after the girls were asleep. She looked down at her cup for a long time before saying quietly, "There's something I didn't tell you." I waited. "Sarah, my sister, she didn't just die from the condition. She took her own life." Froze. She was overwhelmed. The diagnosis, the girls, the future. She was terrified they'd inherited it, and she couldn't handle watching it unfold. I was speechless. "Michael blamed himself," Margaret added, "for not seeing how bad it was. That's why he kept the girls a secret. He thought if you knew, if you saw what could happen, it would destroy you too." I let that sit in my chest. Heavy, hollow. But more than anything, I felt for my son. He wasn't hiding them out of shame. He was trying to protect everyone. "He was wrong about me," I said softly. "I would have helped." Margaret nodded. "Maybe. But now you are helping. And that matters more." A week later, we submitted the application to the treatment program. I called my financial advisor and told him my money was about to have a new mission. And I told the girls over pancakes and orange juice, "We're going to Baltimore. All of us. Together." Faith asked, "Even on the hard days?" "Especially on the hard days," I said. And I meant it. The transition to Baltimore was intense. We found a small rental house near the hospital. I hired tutors, caregivers, a physical therapist to supplement the clinic visits. Margaret found work through the hospital's patient advocacy office, helping other families navigate the same maze of paperwork and insurance we'd been battling. The first few weeks were rough. Hope got sick from the medications. Joy struggled with fatigue. Faith, though physically healthy, felt invisible, watching her sisters soak up all the attention, all the energy. One night, I found her curled up in the hallway with a book in her lap. "I miss when it was just the three of us," she said. "I know," I whispered. "But you're still just as important. Always." We learned to adjust. There were charts, calendars, color-coded meds and schoolwork and rest breaks. But in between the chaos, something beautiful started to grow. Hope's muscle tests began to show signs of improvement. Joy started walking longer distances without needing to stop. Faith joined a school debate team and absolutely owned her first competition. And then came one particularly big moment. "Can we stay here?" Hope asked during a therapy session. Not just for the treatment. For good. It was a question Margaret and I had been avoiding. We'd rented the house. Kept the old one back home. For now, Baltimore was beginning to feel like home. Margaret brought it up on the porch that night after the girls were asleep. "The lease is almost up on my house," she said quietly. "I need to tell the landlord something." "What do you want to do?" "Yes." She blinked, caught off guard. "I'm not used to being asked what I want." "Well, I'm asking." She looked out at the dark street. Kids were playing down the block. Hope had piano lessons now. Joy was in a writing class. Faith had found friends. A rhythm. "I want them to feel safe," she said. "Settled. Like we're not packing up every few months." "So we stay," I said. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." The next morning, over a plate of syrupy waffles, I put the decision to the girls. "We have two options. Go back to our old life and visit here when we need to. Or stay. For real. Make Baltimore our new home." They didn't hesitate. "Together?" Faith asked. "Always," I said. Joy grinned. "Then we stay," Hope added. "But only if we can still have pizza every Friday." "Deal," I smiled. We started house hunting that weekend. Looking for a home that wasn't just accessible but felt right. Something told me we were about to find it. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of our new home. A big colonial just a few blocks from the hospital, with a sun-filled music room, enough bedrooms for everyone, and a yard full of dandelions and noise. Hope was practicing piano in the living room, fingers moving slowly but confidently across the keys. Joy was sprawled on the floor with a notebook, writing another one of her magical adventure stories. Faith was in the office-turned-debate lab, preparing her speech for the regional competition. Margaret came through the door, fresh from work. "Dr. Chen called," she said, setting down her bag. "She wants to include the girls in a case study. Their progress has been that significant." Smiled. "That's incredible." When we told the girls later that night, they were thoughtful. "Would it help other kids?" Hope asked. "It could," I said. "A lot of them." Joy nodded. "Then we should do it." Faith looked at her sisters and added, "We know how scary it was at first. If we can help someone else not be so scared, we should." They weren't just survivors. They were becoming leaders. That night, after dinner, after dishes and stories and a surprise debate about pineapple on pizza, I stood in the hallway, looking at our new family photos on the wall. There were pictures of birthdays, hospital visits, therapy milestones, laughter, exhaustion. Oi. One photo, tucked on my nightstand, was my favorite. Michael sitting on the floor, all 3 girls around him like a pile of puppies, everyone laughing. Margaret had found it among Sarah's old things. In that picture, Michael looked complete. And I finally understood. He hadn't hidden them out of shame. He'd hidden them because he was trying to carry everything alone. Because he didn't think anyone could handle the pain. He was wrong. Loving these girls, even with the hard days, the doctor's appointments, the nights of fear and fatigue, had been the most healing thing that ever happened to me. They didn't just fill the emptiness he left behind. They gave me purpose. They gave me noise and mess and laughter and hope. They gave me a family. So if you're still here, thank you for listening to my story. And now I'm curious. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever uncovered a secret that changed everything? Have you ever been saved by someone you didn't even know you needed? Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to see how far our story travels. And before you go, I've left 2 other stories on screen, both unforgettable and both might just surprise you. Thank you for being here.